Hello everyone, it's Guy Morgan here and welcome to episode 2 of Walk in the Road. Today we're talking to accomplished award-winning theatre actor and playwright Thomas Campbell about living and working and travelling solo and the impact that that's had on his life and his outlook. And we'll also be talking about the idea of considering family occasions, reunions, celebrations, etc., and the idea of taking them somewhere else, to a beach house or a farm or a different property and a different environment, and the impact that that can have on those kinds of events. So sit back, relax, and join me for Fork.
My name is Tom Campbell, and I thought I would speak a little bit about my experience of living overseas. So when I was 7 years old, I moved from, my family moved from Melbourne to Tasmania, which, I was quite young, but I was very aware once I arrived in Hobart that it was a very tiny town, and I really, really missed the big city lights and movement and, excitement. So I made a promise to myself that I was going to move to a big city as soon as I became an adult. So that did happen. I moved to Sydney when I was 17, and once I got here and started my acting career, I definitely had this kind of urge still to move to an even bigger city, a really massive city. And in my mind always that was New York. So I remember my first big trip overseas, I made sure that I was going to New York. I was going to LA for a short film festival called the Oscars. And I booked a trip to New York the week after, totally by myself. I was shit scared. I remember on the plane from LA to New York, I'd been staying with friends in LA, but I started chatting to the guy next to me on the plane, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind coming in the taxi from the airport to Manhattan with me if I paid, because I was just a bit nervous. I had heard that my sister's friend who travelled to New York had been pulled over in the taxi, and the taxi driver got shot in the head. So I had that playing around in my head. Anyway, this guy got a free trip to Manhattan, and he got me to my accommodation, and I ended up having this week in New York. And in hindsight, it was probably pretty life-changing because I was really alone. I mean, I'd chosen probably the loudest city in the world. So in a sense, I was sitting with my thoughts, but there was lots of sound around me. But I was isolated with my own personality. I had to exist 24/7, totally by myself in that sense. And I'm a pretty social person, so I found it pretty confronting. But by the end of the week, I kind of made a promise to myself that I was always going to travel, by myself. I mean, I've traveled with friends, but I would say the most important travel that I've done in my life has been totally when I've been by myself. So when I got back from New York, that trip, I made another promise to myself. I make lots of them, apparently, to move to New York. I wanted to live there, even if it was just for 6 months and work in a bottle shop. I just wanted to have the experience of living in that massive city. But as visas kind of proved really hard, and as an actor, to get a green card was going to cost a lot of money, London became a bit of an option. And I'd never been to London, but I put the wheels in motion and got into a course in London, and all of a sudden found myself moving to London. As I said, I'd never been there, and I knew absolutely no one. And so I had that experience of not just being in a city, a new place, not knowing anyone for a week like I was in New York, but actually moving my life there. I did a course, so I met people pretty quickly, but the thing that was really interesting for me over those 3 years of living in London, particularly in that first 6 months, was really discovering who I was without my history or past or friends or career. Who was I just as a person meeting someone without them having any knowledge of me previously. And that was probably the most confronting thing. I don't know if it worked out that well for me, but I definitely made the decision to move overseas because I didn't want to regret not doing it. When I say that it didn't work out that well for me, it's not devastating. It was just a very eye-opening, I suppose, life-changing experience, and having to confront a lot of inner demons. And had an amazing time and got to travel. Obviously, London's the gateway to the entire of Europe, and that was amazing to visit Prague on a weekend or Barcelona for however long. But yeah, I suppose if in regards to mental health, the experience of putting yourself in a place with no one to fall back on is a really, really worthwhile thing. I've learned more about myself in those experiences than I have by just sitting in my bedroom or existing in my suburb of Sydney. And I travel a lot these days, and I travel with friends, but I always try and tack on a part of a trip that is just me. I recently did it. I went to Florence. I was in Venice for a friend's birthday, but I tacked on 3 days in Florence by myself. And they're just, I think I get the most growth as a human by doing that. And so that's my experience of travel, and the reason why I try and keep part of it as a solo journey.
So, hi Tom, how are you today?
Good guy, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Thank you for that incredible story about your adventures getting to New York, living in London, and also your, I guess, ritual of travelling alone, and what that does for you, your mental health and mental well-being. It's a terrific approach, and I really enjoyed listening. We all really enjoyed listening to it. If I can just zoom in on a couple of things that you mentioned in your story and ask a couple of questions, Tom.
Sure.
Yeah, so you mentioned when you first went to New York City and you were alone, you sort of entered that in a place of fear, and then the nervous ride in the taxi from the airport and all of that was so terrific, because I think it's something we've all felt. Did you find during that first week that you overcame those fears? And if you did, what do you think was the key to locking into a mindset of being able to do that?
I suppose, because New York, for me, as an actor, I was obsessed with Broadway and I'd always wanted to go and see musicals. I definitely had a point every day where I knew I'd be somewhere to go and see a show. So it kind of gave me some structure. And in and around those shows, obviously I was in a new place, so I wanted to see as much as I could. I think once, as I said, I kind of was so scared the night before I arrived and I went into this lady's house. It was the old Craigslist. Airbnb didn't exist. It was like a booking on Craigslist. So I had no idea. And she said, "Oh, I won't be at home. Just go to the concierge." And I went upstairs and she was actually in her room. It sounded like she was a witch because she was bubbling something. So my fear was even greater, but I had a sleeping tablet. I woke up and I went straight to see a Wednesday matinee of Hairspray, I remember. And I think from that point on, the fear was replaced with just utter joy and excitement of, I was at a place where I'd always dreamt of being, and I just allowed myself to, I'd go and see a show, and then I'd go to a club and meet someone and then go back to their house, and then the day would start all over again. But yeah, I think it was just the fear was replaced with just like childlike wonderment and excitement.
Almost like
so yeah,
a new type of familiarity came into it.
Yeah, and also just, I suppose, having something that I always knew I wanted to do every day, which was a show.
Yeah,
it gave me drive to get I wasn't scared to leave the house in that sense, because I had to get somewhere to get the ticket, and the adventures continued. Once you just start walking, you discover things.
Right, launch yourself into it. Launch yourself into it. Yeah.
I mean, it'd be a waste of money if you just sat in your room the whole time.
and yet, people do.
Yeah, right.
And then your fantastic story of finally moving to London, and again, you mentioned the term, confronting some inner demons that appeared during that stage of your life. Are there any that you could share, just in terms of a specific inner demon that adventure you felt you confronted it, you saw it, you overcame it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just expanding slightly on what I said in the bit, I suppose it was more that, as a as a young adult, I got into drama school really young, and my identity became a lot about my career as an actor. So all my friends knew me as an actor, and I suppose I had a level of respect. And when I did meet new people, they knew me as an actor. So there was a kind of, I always had that to fall back on as a personality.
Yes.
I was known as an actor, and all my friends were actors. So when I moved to London, no one knew my acting career.
You were nothing. You were nothing.
I was nothing. I was a spot on the ground. But and so I suppose that inner demon of always feeling not enough was something that I just had to go, well, I am enough, and without that, without a career to fall back on or respect from that, who am I just as a soul in this world? And especially within those first 6 months, it was just really kind of meeting people as me without any expectation. And what is my personality? How does it get read? And I mean, there were deeper and darker demons, which I don't want to go into, but for an interview scenario, that one will do. Yeah.
That's great. That's so, and I could so relate. I could so relate to what you're saying. When you take away all the props, that people identify with you, what's left? What's actually left, right?
Yeah, totally.
And just, I guess, those things that happened in New York and London for you, I know that, for my time when I lived overseas, there's obviously this transformation that takes place, but some of those are tools, if you like, that you carry with you for the rest of your life, and you apply in everyday situations, even when you're back in your comfort zone, around the people who do know you. Would you be able to perhaps identify one or two differences in your outlook on life, or in the way you relate to other people that you have taken with you from that time, living in New York, traveling to New York, living in London, etc.?
Yeah, one I think is sounds wanky, but very much living in the moment is something I really try and do. I think as a kid, when I moved to Tasmania, I always was looking to the future of like, I'll move to Melbourne, or I'll move to Sydney, I'll move to that big city and have that big dream. And then even when I was living in Sydney, I was like, I'll move to the bigger city, and then my life will continue. And I remember being in London going, oh, I can't get much bigger than London. Like, there's not another step. So I was like, oh, okay, that's life now. There's nothing to look forward to, and not in a bad sense. Yeah, I'm done. But it was that moment of like, just enjoy where you're living, have that experience of just, and there's an interest, so living in the moment, but there's also a friend of mine, there's this concept, I think, with Australians when they've lived overseas, there's this term that people use to move back to Australia, and it's kind of a negative term. It's like, oh, I've failed, or I'm giving up, or, and I didn't really think of that, but there is definitely a sense of that. So, but a friend of mine, this is very arty. Well, anyway, she went on the Camino Trail, and she was walking along, and that she was moving back to Australia. She was on her way back, and she was very depressed about that concept. And he said, "You're not moving back. You're moving forward in life. You're just moving to Australia." And I remember hearing that, and not that I was devastated about being here in Australia again. I just was like, yeah, it's just another step in your journey of life.
So true. So true. I can so relate to that. And I think a lot of people, probably in hindsight, which always gives us 20/20, but we feel, shit, I'm so glad I did move back to Australia then, because blah, 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 and blah happened, and I wouldn't have met blah, blah, blah. And, life continues. It's not like, you come back to Australia and go into some sort of hole or dark place, or that it's not a fabulous place to live, because we know it is.
It is, yeah.
But we bring back with us so much more wisdom that we've gained, and so our whole approach is different. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah. Just one final question to wrap up, Tom, if you don't mind. this adventures overseas and living in other places, do you think it's impacted on the type of people you find yourself being close to or drawn to, or that you energetically attract in your life these days?
I'm not. Well, I suppose all travel and all experience is going to impact on that. I suppose one thing I always get, because I have a very broad spectrum of friends that are all from very different walks of life, and I must say when I have like birthday parties, I get very anxious that then they're also different. It's going to be, and I'll have to work the room, and it'll be a disaster. But the one thing that is very common with all my close friends is that they're very socially adept and can chat to anyone. And I suppose that travel helps that ability to just kind of walk into a room and find out about someone that you don't know really easily. And that's a common trait that I'm now finally realizing and letting go, that fear of going, I've got to chat to everyone and make sure everyone's all right in my party.
Yeah.
But actually trust that the people that are in my life, they're in my life for a reason. And one of the things that they're all very good at without fail is finding out about other people. Not self-absorbed people.
Yeah.
You know, they're people that really are inquisitive about other people, and I suppose in that sense, other places and cultures. And so yeah, it's definitely, and I've still got some amazing friends from my 3 years in London. I've probably got 3 that I'm close in my very close group of friends that I still chat to, weekly. So yeah, I don't know if that's really an answer to your question, but
I think it is. One observation I would make about your friends, and I've met a few of them, is one of the commonalities I see in the people that you perhaps draw into your life is kindness. I think your friends are a very kind group of people, and they are very welcoming and warm to anybody and interested in other people's lives. And I don't know whether that's was such a commonality before, you flung yourself out there into the world, but it's something I certainly notice now, as a friend of yours, that most of the people I've met through you are incredibly kind. And that's a good thing.
Got a balance for my awfulness,
Exactly. That's what we all say when you've left the room.
Yeah.
No, Tom, thank you so much. That was such a great insight into your story, a story that we all can take something away from, and certainly something that was terrific to be included in this week's edition of Fork in the Road. Thanks, Tom. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Guy.
Hi there. So in this week's segment of Go Away on Fork in the Road, I wanted to talk a little bit about not so much travel tips on where to go, but about the idea of taking events or occasions or celebrations or get-togethers or reunions or dates or events in your life that you might normally spend at home or at a family's home, someone in your family's home or friend's home, or a restaurant or a hotel. Take those events and think about, would they be improved if we took a rented house at a beach, or maybe depending on the number of people, more than one, at a beach, on a hill, on a farm, somewhere new, somewhere different, somewhere with a different kind of environment. And what I've found that experience does is it balances and equalises the energy amongst that group of people. Whereas if you do it, if you hold that event or that celebration at somebody's house, the person who owns the house feels, an obligation to perhaps, present the house in a certain way, or to have to cook or to cater, or provide, or perhaps in some cases to control things. And, you know, people fall into very familiar roles when you tend to go to somebody's house. If you rent a house, not only is it the excitement and novelty of going away and spending time away from anybody's house, a great equaliser and a great balancer, I also think that doing that can make for really more profound memories. And sometimes the cost of it, especially if divided between a number of people, can be, you know, considerably less even than a big slap up meal, you know, at somebody's home, or it might not. But you know, the added benefits, I think, of sometimes doing that and taking everybody a little bit out of their comfort zone can produce a new dynamic amongst people that have known each other for a really long time. And in my experience, that tends to make for a more positive outcome, and sometimes new discoveries about people that you've known for a long time. And that to me makes it something well worth considering in everything from, you know, a family get together for a dinner, all the way through to birthday celebrations, weddings, even wakes, you know, after funerals, gather the people together, not at somebody in particular's home, but at a more neutral space. So that's my tip this week for Go Away. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Bye.